Hello everyone. Today is going to be more of a beginner focused video. It's going to be based on how to properly price check your items. The reason I'm making this video is a lot of the time in my streams, if you want to stop by twitch.tv/electropoe, but a lot of the times in my streams I am being asked to price check, or I see a lot of the YouTube comments and they're asking me what software are you using to price check. So I thought I'd just put everything in one video, the software or the third-party extensions that are available, how to price check, like the general rules and like the corner cases you'll have. So hopefully this provides some value to the newer players. And even if you're an older player, I don't know, maybe refresh your memory or see how I price check, feel free to correct me or give any advice in the comments. First, let's go over the extension that I use. I personally use Exile Exchange 2. It is a GitHub link. There's not like an official website link. So this is not going to be a virus or anything. Don't worry. I'll leave the link to this and the Sidekick in the description. Sidekick is another one that I know people use. I personally do not have experience with it, so I'm not going to talk about it. But you go to the GitHub link for Exile Exchange 2. If you just type in Exile Exchange 2 into Google, you download the installer for whichever OS system you have. For me, I have Windows 11, so I just downloaded the installer. And you got instructions and everything. So let's just go into the game. Alright, so once we have the extension downloaded, I think the default keybinds is shift space, at least it is for me. You press shift space, you go to the cogwheel or the settings button in the top left, and we just go to price check. Just make sure that the league says Rise of the Abyssal, or at least the league that you're in. Sometimes it might just be set to standard. And then you can go and configure stuff like fill stat values to 10%, or you could do exact. This means when you price check your item, it will automatically do 10% lower, or like within the tier as opposed to the exact stats, which is honestly better for price checking, but we're gonna do all that ourselves. And the hotkeys to price check, mine is Control-Alt-D to open without auto hide. What that means is you can open the window and actually press on stuff. And yeah, basically that's the important keybind. So set this one. Let's see if anything. There's just also log out macros, a bunch of macros, whatever it is, in case you want to set that up. There's a regex thing. Some other, some other stuff. I'm not gonna go over all of that. We're just gonna focus on price checking in this video. So I have a couple different items I picked out that I believe will be able to show pretty much everything that I want to speak about when it comes to price checking. And it covers a different variety of items, not just, one type. So let's start out with this Warmonger bow. It's a random bow I had in my stash. Not very good, but it'll do the job. So when we press Control-Alt-D, or else that's what my keybinds are, the way I like to price check is I always round down. I try and choose only the stats that I know add value. I'll speak more about that later. And then I find the conservative price. Then when I list the item, I list it slightly higher than what the conservative price was, in case somebody needs that specific. Let's say you're doing a ring and the conservative price was 5 divines for the ring, but you have a certain resistance. Maybe somebody's going to need that exact resistance or your combination of resistances. So they might pay a little extra. So I give it some time. I give it like, a couple divines up or down. And then I'll slowly lower the price to what I know is the actual price of the ring. And then I'll just leave it at there and wait for it to sell. Obviously, if it's not selling after a day or so, then you have to lower it and you can understand that the price is going to change. But let's say this bow, for example. What are the stats that are important on a weapon? There's the DPS, the types of DPS, for example, if it's all Fizz or if it's Fizz and Lightning. There's the crit hit chance, and then there's the suffixes on the bow, and the amount of sockets. One cool thing about Exile Exchange is that you can put in the runes without actually having to do it. So let's say I put in the runes, physical runes, right? That's not greater iron runes. It'll be 411 DPS and 351 Fizz DPS. So let's just assume Let's just price check 350 Fizz DPS, because I think that's the most important part here. Total DPS is not bad too. And we will go +4 attack skills. Why are these the things that I'm searching up? Because these are the stats that add value. If I press on Dex right now, the price of the bow will go up. But is Dex on a bow a stat that people will pay an extra 80 exalts for? Or whatever the difference in price is? No. So you have to have a general understanding of what is sought after. Because if you make the item search too specific, unless you have like 6 tier 1 mods, and obviously you know that these are all good mods, if you make the search for the item you're looking at too specific, it's going to show you higher prices simply because there's less items of that, you know, of that variant. And then if I press Leech Life too, it's a divine, you know, we throw some shit around, we put 400 DPS, and it might be completely different. We say Warmonger Bow, and then we make it, you know, 5.5 crits per. You get the idea. If you make the item too specific, you're not going to get an accurate price. So while it is unfortunate to say, having some experience and just generally understanding what stats are valuable on what weapon piece is quite important to, like, I won't be able to go over every weapon and say what's valuable on spears. Oh, but on Amazon's spears want accuracy versus whether you run spears on monk. It's you get the idea of what I'm trying to say. So as you play the game more and you know what the meta is and you know what generally good stats are, it gets easier to price check. But that comes with everything in PoE. It's a knowledge-based game. So like I mentioned, we're going to go here. We're going to put in our runes that we could normally put in. Let's say 400. And when you're selling, you have to put in runes because on the trade website, it doesn't automatically show extra DPS if it's empty rune sockets, but you don't have to quality because on the trade websites, it shows the DPS as if it goes up to 20 quality. So what I mean is, even though this weapon's not quality and it might be 250 DPS right now, if it would be 300 DPS, when somebody searches up on the trade filter for 300 DPS minimum, this will still show up because it doesn't have the quality, but it can get that. So like I mentioned, you put in the Fizz runes, you search up the stats you think are important. Let's say 400 DPS and +4, and you get a price, and you can say, but Fizz DPS is pretty important. Some people might not want fire and cold, so let's search this too. I would say this is a fair way to evaluate the bow, and it's 15 exalts. Obviously, not a good bow, but it's what I had to give an example with. Next, let's go to rings. Rings are probably one of the harder things to price check, as different builds need such vast combinations of rings, and there's like so many possible options, and then you have to take into consider resistances and whatnot. So rings, I honestly recommend using the website oftentimes. As here you can see, if I search up a ring with all elemental resistances on it, if I even have a ring, all elemental. Here, perfect. For example, this will say 39 total elemental resistances when you search it up. Now, all elemental resistances, it's a much more valuable affix than just, for example, if this was 39 fire. Especially on something like prismatic rings. It's a much more valuable affix, but it still just says 39 elemental resistances. So if you press this little button, it will pull up the trade site. If we pull up the trade site, we'll see a bunch of rings with, you see, these are two different resistances. This is not all elemental resistances. All elemental resistances is more valuable. So a lot of the times when you do rings, especially with Exile Exchange, you're gonna just have to pull up the website and type in all elemental resistances. But let's go over again, like making items more obscure. This ring is worth peanuts and bones, right? It's not worth anything. You wouldn't even look at this ring. But if I select every single modifier on this ring, okay, well there is one, but you can imagine if you do that, I guess that wasn't a great example, but like, you get what I mean. If you make the search too specific, it's going to show you not the actual value of the item. So you only want to select the mods that matter. So let's see how I price check this ring. I use this for Blood Mage Spark, and I know what stats are valuable here. Rarity is valuable, life is valuable, cast speed is valuable, and chaos res is valuable, and lightning damage is valuable. But I know the least valuable stat is lightning damage, and 18% lightning damage in the grand scheme of things is not going to increase the ring's value by twice the amount. So let's see. If I search this up right here, I know chaos res is valuable. Elemental resistances is not valuable. Why? Because we have no resistances when we run this. So in this case, on this ring, it's not that valuable. I'm not going to select it. And we're just going to check the minimum price, and we're going to check Pearl base ring. We can see it's around 15, maybe 19 divines. When you see this, I would recommend pulling up the trade site. When you see such a large disparity, 15, 15, then 19, see if there's something wrong with these rings. Maybe they have two, like, look, this has evasion on it. Terrible stat. This has 14 mana on it. Terrible stat. So you kind of got to look at it. This has 9 to 15 cold damage, useless stat. Chaos damage, useless stat. So my ring is technically better. But let's see how much it would be with if I select the lightning damage. Okay. So if I select 18% lightning damage with it, which is like virtually useless. I mean, it's the last useful mod possible on this ring, but it's not that great. It's not going to be 50 divines. I just simply don't believe that somebody's willing to spend an extra 25 divines or 35 divines for 18% lightning damage when you have 1,000 on the build. Now, can you still list this ring for that price for 50 divines and be like, I'm going to try it? You could. Will it probably sell? No. And then that's when people come into my stream and they say, oh, my ring's not selling, is because you select every single stat and you got to think rationally. You got to think rationally as, is this stat good enough to justify a 2.5x price and value? Now I'm going to go over like triple socket and corrupts. So in the top right, you can left click and it will change whether the gloves are corrupted or not. So a lot of the time people make mistakes. They select 3 sockets and they do not corrupt it. And they're like, oh, there's no gloves like this. Yeah, it's because you can't have a 3-socket gloves without it being corrupted. So just make sure it's correctly selected. And look, now it says there's no items like this. Is that true? Are there really no items like this? No. So you got to think, what on these gloves are useful? The things that are useful on these gloves is the life, is the chaos res, and increased effect of socketed items. Everything else, the fizz damage to attacks, is not useful on this pair of gloves because this is not going to be used by an attack-based build. Is the amount of energy shield and armor useful? Not really. I mean, it's 128 armor. This is not the reason you'd be buying the gloves. So you have to think about the reason these gloves would sell for their price. So I'm only going to select the chaos resistance, the life, and the increased effect. And then now we will see a pair of gloves. Still, this is quite high. So let's round these down a little. Let's do 25 chaos res. And you can see the divine price already dropped. Let's do 115 life. And we'll get a conservative price. Okay, so it seems that these gloves are worth 60 divines. I recommend opening the trade site to see how do these gloves look. They have... you see? This is why you always have to open the trade site. These gloves do not have chaos resistance on them. They have chaos resistance socketed inside of them. So this 60 divine pair of gloves will never sell for 60 divines. Because you don't want to run these runes. So that's why you always have to check. Imagine you, like this guy probably price checked his gloves. He selected the chaos res and he compared it to this pair of gloves, which actually has 30 chaos res. And he's like, oh, it's 60 divines. This pair of gloves will never sell ever. Like there's nothing, like just never. It will never sell for this price. And then he's going to be the one that's complaining, oh, my item's not selling. Let's look at the next item. These gloves have more maximum life than my gloves, which is a very important stat. They have 5 less or like 6 less chaos res, and then they are triple socketed and good. So I would compare my gloves to these. Let's see the next pair of gloves. These are also comparable to my gloves, but they're 20 more divines than the gloves below them. So while I'm sitting here, am I thinking that people will pay 20 more divines for... how much more chaos res? 3 and 3? 6 more chaos res? Maybe. Maybe somebody really needs this last 6 chaos res. But often people are fine without having capped chaos res. They want more maximum life instead. So I believe my gloves would be around the 50 to 60 range. That's how I would price them. Whether you want to list them for 80 and hope And look, let's look at another pair of 80 gloves. These have socketed chaos res in them, but they have rarity, which is a valuable stat. Could these gloves sell for 80? Yeah, maybe. I'm not going to argue that they might sell for 80, but they're trying to fool people that are buying the gloves or searching them up with putting the runes in there. These are not the runes you would run. You would run cast speed runes, at least for my build. So that's how I think about the gloves and the ring. Now let's look at a Heart of the Well. This is a very popular jewel this league. A lot of people are searching up. And here, the reason I choose this is because, number one, there's useful stats, but there's also divine ranges. The gain as extra are the most important stats, and depending on how they're divine, they're priced very differently. For example, I'll show you right here. Whether you have min divine gain as extra lightning, or you have 14 gain as extra lightning, the price is very different. So first, I will always check the useful stats, which you have to know. Flask effect duration's not useful, so I'm not going to select it. Minimally divined. So now we know what these mods in combination are worth by themselves, not thinking about the divine. It seems like 42 divines. If I press increase flask duration, it's going to be like, oh my god, I have the best jewel, nobody has this. But that's not a mod people care about, so I'm not going to press that. Next, now that we got a baseline value of the mod values, we're going to look at the divine. Let's say I'm not going to do my 15 divine because it's going to give me too high of a price. But let's say we get a decent divine on the fire. 12 is still 42. Let's say we have a decent divine on the crit, which we do. It's still 42. Let's say 10% and it's still 42. So as you can see, even with the divine, the minimum price is 42. You could try and be like, oh, this 42 divine one will sell, and then the next one will pop up. But it's also, you got to take into consideration, this has been up for 12 hours and it hasn't sold for 42 divines yet. So whether you want to take that as a sign and undercut this person or list it at the same price, it's your choice. Another cool thing is you can hold shift and you can see the stats. Let's see what the last stat he has on here is. Is damage taken recouped as life? Is that useful? Not really. Not something people would pay more for. That's why he has it listed at 42. And we can see his divine is roughly as good as mine. See, the problem is if I made the divine too high, then we'd be at 75. And I'd be sitting here like, oh my god, my jewel's 75. I'd list it and it wouldn't sell for days. Why? Because one less as extra fire is worth 30 divines less. So that's why you always check the minimum divine first, and then you check your divine or like your stat combination. So let's get a quick TLDR because I've been rambling and normally I cut in the video and I just did this all in one take. When you're price checking, be conservative, always round down, always round your stats down to the nearest breakpoint. When people search up items, they do it by breakpoints. If they're doing weapons, they're searching 500 DPS, 525, 550. Always round down to the nearest breakpoint. Get a conservative value. Look at what the items are priced. Are they really better? Are they worse? Are the stats on them more valuable, the combination of stats? And then price based on that. Sometimes you can go a little bit higher just to, maybe somebody buys it for more, and then slowly lower it. If you are doing corrupted items or multi-socket items, make sure you have that selected. Obviously, that adds value. Even if you don't have extra sockets from the corrupt, make sure you select corrupted because that changes the price. If the item's corrupted versus uncorrupted, obviously uncorrupted items sell for more. If an item's sanctified, you can select that it's sanctified. If you're doing rings or like anything that's obscure, think about what mods really do matter. Like I showed an example, without the lightning damage, the ring's 18 divines. With the 18% lightning damage, which is pretty much negligible, it is 2.5 times the price. So if I list this ring for 50 divines, I'm probably going to be sitting there wondering why it's not selling. If you're doing jewels or something that has a combination of mods, only select the useful mods, minimum divine, and then check your divine so you can gauge as to where to price your item between that. I want to show real quick on how to price check item bases. Let's say you have a blue base that you drop, whatever this is, like valuable stuff is like Warmonger bows with +2 arrows. You go and you click base item, and then it will select basically everything, and you collect the stat you think is valuable. So this is how you would check blue items. If you want to check fractured items, for example, do I have a fractured item anywhere? One second. I have to go find a fractured item. I probably should have done this. Fracture. Okay, we're going to fracture an item right now. We are going to fracture a random item right now. Let me get a breach ring. Alright, doesn't matter. You get a fracturing orb. Wow, I am really broke right now. Okay, one second. Let me get enough exalted orbs to buy a fracture item. Or fracturing orb. We throw this at the ring. And then we go base item, fractured. You can add empty suffixes or not. But you take fractured. This will not sell for 25 exalts. I'll tell you that much right now. As it's a tier 3 fizz fracture. But that's also how you would price check fractured items. Is there anything else we're missing? I think we got pretty much everything done. If you price check amulets, you can price check anoints. For corrupts on uniques, just make sure you put whatever your corrupt is. So, I don't know, like if it was 60, you could put 60. Boom, you get your price. I think that covers all the basics and will explain. Obviously, there are some items that are harder to price, whether it's expensive weapons or you're not exactly sure if a certain combination of mods is worth something. In that like scenario, if you are not sure, but it really does not seem like you couldn't possibly imagine linking those stats together. Like, let's say you have increased chaos damage, flat damage to fizz, and evasion rating ring. If you price check that, you probably wouldn't be able to find anything, especially if you have obscure suffixes. Just think logically. Does a build want flat physical and then also increase chaos damage and then also evasion? Probably not. I can't think of any build that would want that. Is it possible? Sometimes you misprice your items. Yes. If you're really scared, oh, I really think this is worth something, just list it for high. It most likely won't sell, and then you'll lower it and you realize how much it was actually worth. Besides that, if there's anything else like beginner-esque that you guys want me to try my best at explaining, I could do that. So if you want, just leave that at the comments. I've seen some people talk about like mapping, picking stuff up while mapping and which bases to ID. I have that in the back burner. I have a couple videos I want to release before that. But if anything else, I'm always open to suggestions. Besides that, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed the video or it helped you in any way, feel free to like or subscribe. Thank you very much.